And as the battle against the dread wyverns came to its conclusion, a horrible stillness fell across the battlefield, as the only sound that could be heard was the heavy breathing and heavier footsteps of Kolthor, eternal legend and master of the gleaming blade. He tried to force his body onward, but each step grew heavier than the last. Until finally, after 8 thundering steps, his body racked by the wyvern's terrible poison, he succumbed to his wounds and fell to the ground. This is the tale of Kolthor's final battle. Ha! Hear, hear, and a good tale it is. You, my friend, have a knack for the storytelling. What? I said you did a good job with the storytelling. I thought it was well done. Today, we're going to talk about the new book, War of Immortals for Pathfinder 2nd Edition, on today's episode of The Local Disaster Tour Guide. Happy Halloween, travelers and tourists. My name is Mark, and I am the local disaster tour guide. That's right, I am a storyteller that is very happy to see Paizo has finally admitted that storytelling should give you superpowers. Welcome to a journey through the fantastic world of TTRPGs like Pathfinder and Starfinder, and welcome to a review/overview of the newest book for Pathfinder 2nd Edition, War of the Immortals. This is a book that has a lot of heavy lifting to do for Pathfinder 2nd Edition, as it addresses some of the major fallout from the recent War of Immortals event that has happened inside the Golarion setting for Pathfinder 2nd Edition. For those of you who are not aware, recently the god of war Gorum was struck down by Akachik, the evil god of the Red Mantis Assassins. In Gorum's death, an event called the Godsrain has been kicked off, where Gorum's blood and pieces of his armor are spilling all across the world of Golarion, causing strange new powers to erupt all across the planet. This is a major event in the Golarion setting, and Paizo has said that the ramifications of this event are going to be felt for a very long time inside the setting, but beyond just covering the events of the War of the Immortals, this book is also a very heavy player-facing book covering a lot of new options inside of Pathfinder 2nd Edition. It covers the new Animist and Exemplar classes, gives us several new character options, especially class archetypes, that are themed around the War of Immortals, and, probably most significantly in this book, introduces Mythic rules for Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Now, if you're unfamiliar as to what Mythic rules are, you could go check out Mythic Adventures from Pathfinder 1st Edition, or play the video game Wrath of the Righteous by Owlcat, as we have seen Mythic rules in the Golarion campaign setting before, and this book is the book that is going to reintroduce Mythic rules to Pathfinder 2e, and we're going to talk today about how Paizo does that, what Mythic looks like inside of Pathfinder 2nd Edition, and I'm going to give you my overall thoughts on what this book has to offer. Now, to that effect, I will say that the majority of this book does cover Mythic rules. So Mythic character options like Mythic Callings and Mythic Destinies. It's going to offer Mythic artifacts and Mythic spells that characters might be able to wield. And there's even going to be a small section for storytellers who are interested in using Mythic rules that talks about how to adapt monsters to a Mythic game and how to adapt encounter design for the Mythic characters at your gaming table. So in a way, you can kind of look at War of the Immortals as almost two separate products. a smaller initial product offering some standard character options related to War of the Immortals, and then a larger second product that is centered around adding mythic stories to your Pathfinder 2e game. So we're going to talk about all of that today, but before I dive into that, I do really quick want to say thank you very much to Paizo for sending me a review PDF of this book. They were kind enough to provide that to me so I could create this video, but I do want to make very clear, Paizo has not attempted to influence this review in any way. The opinions expressed in this video are entirely my own. Now, the street date for War of Immortals is either October 30th or October 31st, I don't remember which one. But as with any review that I do on this channel, I do encourage you to remember that the opinions expressed in this video are entirely the thoughts of just some random guy on YouTube. And I always encourage you to check out a product for yourself before making any final purchase decisions. Still, I do hope that this video gives you an idea of what to expect from this book, and helps give you an idea of whether or not this product is something that you might want to add to your collection. Of course, all that means that I would love to hear your thoughts on War of the Immortals, so definitely jump down to the comments section and let me know what interests you about this book, what questions you might have that I could cover in future videos. Join in the conversation and let me know all of that, and yes, do all of that other stuff that helps to support the channel. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. You can check out my free Discord and my Patreon. All of those links will be in the video description down below, but with all of that out of the way, let's get started. Now, with any video review that I do on this channel, I always like to begin at the end, give you my overall thoughts on a product, and then work my way through the product, highlighting some of the things that help me reach that conclusion. So I think the big picture discussion of the book War of Immortals should begin with the statement that this is very much a player-facing book. There are a lot of options in here for players. There's a lot of cool things that I think players would want to explore and use. And I'm not gonna lie, a lot of the mythic options look really fun. As a player, I would be pretty excited to dig into a lot of the mythic options that are presented here. This product is very much intended for and directed to players in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. That being said, there are a few small sections that are intended more for storytellers, such as the sections that talk about how to design mythic monsters and how to balance encounters around mythic characters. And to that extent, I just want to say, if you add this book to your collection, be aware that certain sections of this book really should not be shown to players because, well, it could spoil some things for them. War of Immortals is a very narrative-focused book, and we'll talk about that more here in a moment. But because the narrative is so important to a lot of the content in War of Immortals, that does mean that some of the content that is Game Master facing really is the kind of content that players shouldn't be reading, because if they do, it could kind of destroy the mystique of the game. So if you are a player or a Game Master who is interested in picking up this book, just bear in mind that while much of the earlier sections really is geared towards what players can do and all the fun options that players can have as a result of the War of Immortals, there are certain sections, especially the section on mythic monsters, that really should be reserved for GMs. And if you're a player, I would recommend avoiding those so that some of the excitement of discovering that information doesn't get spoiled for you before the game even begins. All of that being said, my big picture thoughts on this book are, I really, really love this book. This book is custom made for the kinds of stories I like to tell as a storyteller, and it is custom made for the kinds of games that I like to play in when I'm a player. I like the larger-than-life, legendary, mythic style of stories. I ran multiple mythic games in Pathfinder 1st Edition, despite how completely ridiculous those rules were. I ran multiples of those games, I loved them then, and I am so excited to have this back now. And Paizo has really kept a very strong focus on the idea of narrative. I'm jumping ahead a little bit in talking about the mythic section of this book, but really I feel like that's probably the biggest selling point of this product. And one of the things that Paizo emphasizes about mythic characters is mythic characters are very much intended to be the types of characters that reshape the world around them. Their life is so intense, so dramatic, that they are, for lack of a better term, destined to leave their mark on the world. And the assumptions about mythic characters lead to the kinds of characters that just have a lot more narrative weight than your typical character would in a story. These are your King Arthurs, these are your Thor Odin's sons. These are the kinds of characters who are going to reshape the world around them, and the mythic rules are designed to show that. And far and away, I feel like Paizo has done a good job keeping the focus on the narrative weight that these characters should have. I'm not going to say that the mechanics are perfect, but I feel like the balance of narrative to mechanics is pretty close to spot on, and I really appreciate the work that Paizo did. So in terms of the positives for this book, I would say that the narrative of this book and the way that Paizo uses the mechanics in this book to sell the narrative of this book is just fantastic. I've always said that Paizo has some of the best setting writers in the industry, and this book kind of proves that point. Like, we won't have time to dig into everything this book has to offer, but a good example is the Seneschal class archetype for the Witch. During the War of Immortals, many powerful beings all across the Golarion setting are meeting their end, which means it is very plausible for gods and patrons to pass away in the setting, which means that you could have characters such as a witch who is suddenly running around in a setting where their patron, the one who gave them their power, is no more, and they have to make their way inside the setting without that guidance or that assistance that they once had. So this is, I think, a really good example of what Paizo has done with this book. The Seneschal allows you to play a witch whose patron is either dead or missing, and they now have to make their own way, and the entire class archetype revolves around what that kind of character might need to do in order to be successful. You can really see in this book that Paizo has thought in depth about how the mechanics of their game should feed into the narrative, and that is far and away the biggest positive of this book. The relationship between mechanics and narrative is very strong in this product, and from the perspective of a storyteller, I love that. Stepping into some more neutral considerations, I will say something important to remember about this book is this book leans into certain types of stories really heavily, and the content in this book is not necessarily going to be appropriate for every single table. You have things like the new Exemplar class, which is literally labeled as rare, and then a whole host of options that are explicitly labeled as uncommon options inside the game. And by the way, the Acrobat's Calling, the Bookkeeper's Calling, the things you see on screen right now, these uncommon options are some of the early Mythic options. Paizo is very deliberate about using the uncommon and rare tags on a lot of things in this book because they work really well for certain stories, and they might be thematically inappropriate for other stories, and players and game masters really need to have a good conversation at the start of a campaign about what the story is intended to be to determine whether or not a lot of these options are something that characters should be looking into. So that's not really a positive or a negative, it's just something you want to consider. My table, probably largely because of me, plays a lot of stories like what War of Immortals is intended to support, so for my table, this product is amazing. If you prefer a grittier game, or if you prefer a more low fantasy game, if you're not going for those over-the-top style of stories, this book might not be appropriate for you, and that's just something you need to keep in mind. Now, obviously, I'm gushing a lot about this product, but I do want to stress that I don't think this product is perfect. If there is a noticeable weakness to this product, I think it can best be described as Paizo had to do a lot with this book, and some portions of this book don't feel fully developed. I mentioned earlier that Paizo has to introduce the War of Immortals, the Godsrain, it has to introduce 2 new classes and several class archetypes, and then it has to introduce all of the Mythic rules, including a whole host of options for the Mythic rules. Paizo is covering a lot of ground here, which means some portions of this book feel more like Paizo setting the stage for future products, rather than offering something that is fully fleshed out just in this book alone. A good example of that is the Mythic Spells section. The Mythic Spells section comes with 14 new spells that Mythic characters might be able to employ. And, don't get me wrong, I love a lot of these new spells. I think there's a lot of fun stuff in there. Fans of Wrath of the Righteous probably appreciate the art that's on screen right now. But if I'm being entirely honest, as amazing as the 14 new spells are, you do kind of walk away from this product wishing that there were more new Mythic spells than just 14. And the same could also be said about the equipment and the monster section. Paizo sets the stage really well for options that they can present down the road. They've put the structure in place that you can really build on a lot of these ideas, but if you're looking at this product just by itself, some of the pickings do seem a little bit slim, and that is a bit of a negative. Now, all things considered, I think War of Immortals is an amazing product. This is very much a book that I think is going to get a ton of use at my gaming table, and if you love some over-the-top stories in your TTRPGs, I think you will find this product very compelling. So even if there are a few weaknesses here and there, I still think this is an excellent product. But as I've said before, you do want to check this book out and make sure that the themes that it supports and the content that it offers is right for your gaming table, because not every table is necessarily going to want to use this book. Now what I'd like to do is take a look at the different chapters in War of Immortals and give you a brief idea of some of the content that is available, and along the way I'll try to point out a few of the things that really jump out to me and made me a fan of this book. So Chapter 1 offers a brief description of War of Immortals, what that event is, and the implications that it has for the Golarion setting, and they do lay out some of the associated adventures and other tie-ins that they are doing that surround the War of Immortals, so that if you're really interested in this content and you're looking for other products that support this content, they take their time to kind of point you in that direction. Of course, along the way, they have to show the death of Gorum, which is the event that initiates the Godsrain and the War of Immortals. We've seen this artwork a few different places, and yes, it shows up here too. But the book really kicks off with the chapter Legendary Heroes, which is going to introduce 2 new classes. First up, we have the new Animist class, which is a new divine spellcasting class that uses wisdom as its key attribute. Now, I will tell you, during the playtest, the Animist was a class that I wasn't really sold on at the time. I've wanted to see more wisdom-based casters in Pathfinder 2e, so I was excited to see that, but I wasn't sure if they were going to be able to make the Animist really distinguish itself well from other classes, but I will say that the final version of this class has come through a lot stronger than the playtest version did. The principal class feature of the Animist is an ability called Apparition Attunement, wherein each day during your daily preparations, you attune yourself to 2 different spiritual beings, and in the process of attuning yourself to those beings, you gain access to certain spells and certain powers that are a reflection of what they hope to accomplish in the world. The Animist, therefore, is very much intended to be a class that serves as a bridge between the physical and spiritual world, and I will say that the final version of the class feels like it has done that a little bit better than the playtest did. Their spellcasting is quite interesting, but I'm going to save that conversation for when I cover the Animist in my Classic Introduction series, so be on the lookout for that, probably sometime in early December. But what I like about the Animist is they kind of feel like a class that can switch their subclass around depending upon their needs in a given day or a given story. Now, every Animist does have a specific subclass that they will select. There are 4 practices in general that are offered: the Liturgist, the Medium, the seer, and the shaman, those are going to be set when you create your character. But in terms of the actual apparitions that are available, there are 11 total apparitions that actually appear in this book, and given the fact that you have the opportunity to switch those apparitions out every day, this leads to a divine spellcaster that's going to have some interesting flexibility in how they approach adventuring. Overall, I feel like Animist got some pretty good options, and I'm looking forward to diving into them a little more in depth in a future video. And what can I say but hey, Paizo says you're welcome, because there is a second class in this book as well, the new rare Exemplar class. And again, I do want to emphasize, this class is intended to be rare. The idea is, your character has a divine spark inside of them, and as an Exemplar, it is your ability to manipulate that divine spark that leads to all of your powers that you use throughout the adventuring day. The Exemplar is a martial class, and the core of the class is this ability that you see on screen now called Divine Spark and Icons. As an Exemplar, you bond with specific items that serve as icons of your power. Now, these icons have different categories. There are weapon icons, there are body icons, there are worn icons, and the rules for every type of icon and specific icon is going to be a little bit different, but the idea is that you charge one of these icons with your Divine Spark, granting some kind of bonus as long as your Divine Spark inhabits that icon. However, you can do more than just charge an icon. You can also accomplish powerful effects while using the icons. You can use an ability called Spark Transcendence to perform some kind of mighty deed associated with the particular icon that you are using. Now, when you use Spark Transcendence, you are essentially shoving the Divine Spark out of that icon, and it's automatically going to transfer to a different icon that your character is using, meaning that the specific powers that you have as an Exemplar are going to shift depending on where your Divine Spark resides at any given moment. That alone can lead to some pretty interesting conversations, but another aspect of the Exemplar that I really love is the idea that your name itself carries a certain amount of weight. Starting at 3rd level, you're going to pick up something called a root epithet, which is essentially a title that describes your personality and your deeds, and as the game progresses, this epithet is going to get longer and longer, representing all the great things that you've done, that you've accomplished throughout the game world. And listen, I'm doing my best to avoid getting sued by Disney right now, but all I really want to do while talking about the Exemplar is just link clips from the movie Moana, so I hope you all are impressed by my restraint at the moment. All told, there are currently 21 icons that are printed with the Exemplar, though this very much feels like something where Paizo is going to be adding to these options in the future. At present, there are currently 21 options available, which does feel like a pretty healthy starting place for the class. Again, I'm not going to be deep diving the Exemplar right now, but I do plan on taking a more serious look with my Classic Introduction series later, so definitely jump down to the comments section and let me know which class you'd like to see covered by Classic Introductions first. Would you rather that I cover the Animist or the Exemplar first? Let me know, and I will start trying to get those videos out again, probably sometime in early December. Next up, we have a chapter called the Servants of Power, and Servants of Power is a chapter that, if you look at the chapter map, doesn't seem like it offers much, but I'm actually really impressed with this chapter as well. It's going to offer some new lineages, well, I guess I should say updated lineages for the Nephilim, as well as the multi-class archetypes for the Animist and Exemplar, and then finally it's going to give us 5 class archetypes for use inside Pathfinder 2e as well. In the Pathfinder 2e remaster, the Aasimar and the Tiefling versatile heritages were replaced by the Nephilim versatile heritage, and in this book, the Nephilim versatile heritage has been further updated to cover a few other character options that previously existed, but Paizo's just kind of bringing them all under the same heading. In this instance, 4 new lineage options are presented for the Nephilim, which cover the Aphorite, the Gonzi, the Cajosus, and Nephilim who have been touched by the fiendish Asuras. These come in the form of the Aeon-bound, Battle-blooded, Fault-spawn, and Protean-kin lineage feats, and can I just say, I love this Gonzi artwork. Fantastic inclusion. Several of these concepts were previously covered in the Lost Omens Ancestry Guide, and essentially they have been updated here, though I do believe that the Battle-blooded, which are related to, possibly descended from, Valkyries, I think this is actually new for Pathfinder 2e. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think I've seen these in a previous product. Essentially, the Nephilim versatile heritage has been expanded to effectively cover a wider array of character concepts, always something we're going to be glad to see. Next up, you get the Animist multi-class archetype and the Exemplar multi-class archetype, and by the way, this has already been errated. The Exemplar archetype is rare, just like the Exemplar class, but the multi-class archetypes are things that we expect to see, and they are present in this book. However, I think the most notable section of this chapter are the 5 new class archetypes. Now, class archetypes is something that we've only seen a couple of times before, but it looks like Paizo's getting a little more serious about putting some of these out, so let's talk about what those are really quick. A class archetype, unlike a normal archetype, is an archetype that exists for a specific class. In this case, we're looking at the Avenger, which is kind of the updated version of the Slayer from Pathfinder 1st Edition. The Avenger is a class archetype specifically for the Rogue class. You pick this at first level, it's going to alter what you get at first level, and then at second level, you have to specifically take the Avenger dedication as your second level class feat, and these things taken together are going to shift some of the assumptions about what your class gets and how your class operates inside of the game. We have the Avenger for the Rogue, the Blood Rager for the Barbarian, and let me tell you, I'm kinda sad we can't dig into this one right now, because this one is really cool. The Seneschal for the Witch, the Vindicator for the Ranger, and the Warrior of Legend for the Fighter. Again, I'm not going to dig too deep into these, I'll probably come back and cover them in future videos. For some quick commentary, I will say on the Vindicator, I'm a little bit conflicted about this. The Vindicator is a class archetype for the Ranger, and it serves as an update and a replacement of the Inquisitor from Pathfinder 1st Edition. And I'm going to be honest, I was really hoping the updated Inquisitor would be an option for the Cleric class, because I feel like Clerics need a little more love in Pathfinder 2e. I understand why Paizo put the Vindicator on the Ranger, and I do think this offers some interesting choices, but my heart is a little bit broken that we didn't see this for the Cleric, because I'm still wishing that the Cleric had some additional options. The Warrior of Legend is one that I've seen a little bit of chatter around as well. Of the various options presented in this book, I think that the Warrior of Legend may be the one that's gotten the most, I don't want to say negative feedback, but definitely concerned feedback. It feels like when I see people raising concerns about this book, Warrior of Legend has been brought up more often than some of the other items. What the Warrior of Legend is intended to portray is characters like the mythological hero Achilles. When you read into this class archetype, when you study the way that it's set up, that's very much what it's intended to do. And overall, I feel like Paizo hit the right beats in trying to do that, though I can also see where some of the concerns that are being raised about this archetype are coming from. Of course, around page 70, we get to what is honestly the heart of this book, the Myths and Legends chapter, which is going to introduce the idea of mythic stories. It's going to talk about what Mythic is, it's going to talk about telling Mythic stories, it's going to talk about Mythic roles, it's going to give you different key terms and rules associated with Mythic. Essentially, 2/3 of this book is devoted to Mythic rules and Mythic content for Pathfinder 2e games, and the lion's share of what you can expect in this book is found in the various Mythic chapters. And in order to save time in this video, I'm definitely not going to be diving into all of it, but I am hoping in November to come back and do some videos specifically on Mythic content, because I want to talk about all the things Paizo did here. There is a lot to this section. However, I am going to pause really quick and say that as much content as you have on mythic characters and mythic stories, starting in this section of the book, Paizo has actually already released some mythic variant rules. In other words, as much content as can be found for mythic stories in this book, Paizo recognized the fact that what players want from mythic rules might not be perfectly contained in this product, and as a result, they took the time to expand the mythic options. And I don't know exactly how this product's going to be made available, but they intend for the community to have access to some mythic variants so that if the main version of the mythic rules isn't quite what you were hoping for, you have some additional options you can look into. I don't want to chase this rabbit too far, but for the mythic variant rules, the main thing that you would be looking at is alternate mythic progressions through a sort of mythic trial system. So if you don't like what's presented in the main book, War of Immortals, and you liked the mythic trials from Pathfinder 1st edition, then this variant rules PDF is what you're going to be looking for, because Paizo does present this is how you can do that. So, what is mythic? Well, I want to highlight one word, and I really want to stress this if you're trying to understand what mythic is. It is a narrative tool. Certain stories are, by their very design, larger than life. They go far above and beyond even the standard tropes of fantasy to represent characters that literally shake and reshape the world around them, and mythic stories are very much intended to be the kind of stories where this grand narrative is the kind of thing that you're trying to capture and portray through the rules of the game. In other words, don't just add mythic to your games because, hey, here's some options, go have fun. Add these options to your game if the narrative that they support is the kind of story that you and your players want to tell. Honestly, one of my favorite things in this entire book is this little sidebar here that's labeled Inspirational Reading, where they actually give you an example of famous stories that they are trying to model with mythic rules. They talk about famous stories like the Odyssey by Homer and other famous examples of stories throughout human literature that really push the extent of what a narrative can be. And if you're not sure what a mythic tale is intended to be, I love the fact that they give you these inspirational reading options to help you understand what those stories are supposed to portray. And you can see this in terms like destinies, tone, folk tales, and highest fantasy. Paizo is presenting these options to lean into a very specific style of story, and if you are interested in mythic rules, you need to understand them in the context of the stories that they're trying to tell. Now, there is a lot that goes into mythic characters, and again, I'm not trying to dig into everything in this video. They have a mythic rules summary sidebar on page 78 that kind of hits some of the high points you need to be aware of. One is the idea of the new mythic proficiency bonus, which is explicitly a step above legendary and can potentially be available to characters even as low as level 1 or 2. A mythic proficiency bonus is equal to 10 plus your character level, and when you use a mythic proficiency bonus, your character is able to attempt any potential use of that skill. Even if you would normally need to be expert, master, or legendary, your character is, at least for a moment, mythic in scale, so they're allowed to try it even if they normally couldn't. They also talk about mythic points. Mythic points is a system that replaces hero points and is intended to be much more dramatic and much more influential than hero points would normally be. They also have the idea of mythic calling, which is a description of what drives your character's story, and as a result, every mythic character is going to come with a set of edicts and anathema that they are expected to follow, and these edicts and anathema are going to influence how your character accesses their mythic power. The next thing worth noting is the idea of mythic feats, and in this instance, mythic feats function very similar to the popular free archetype variant in Pathfinder 2e. Again, I don't want to dig too deep here, but you can almost think as Mythic as sort of a souped up version of the free archetype system. So if you've ever played a free archetype game and thought to yourself, but can we push this to even more ridiculous extremes, then maybe Mythic is the right thing for you. And then the final concept is something called Mythic Destinies, which is an aspect of the Mythic rules that kicks in level 12 and represents ultimately what your Mythic power is pushing your character to become. Now again, I'm not going to dive into everything because there is a lot of content here, but just to give you a taste of what these Mythic Destinies look like, a character who gets to the highest levels of play under Mythic rules has the opportunity to become an Apocalypse Rider, or maybe an Archfiend. By the way, is this artwork not amazing? I love this artwork. Very cool. An Ascended Celestial, or even an Eternal Legend. And those are just a few of the options available, but essentially what each of these destinies do is they push you towards some grand narrative that is ultimately going to reshape the world of Golarion because of how truly mighty and powerful your character is. By the way, every one of these Mythic Destinies is going to come with a level 20 feat option that gives them some form of limited immortality. For example, for the Eternal Legend, we have the Living Epic feat. You are a living legend, a being who cannot be claimed by death, as death has already passed you. You are beyond whatever they wish to make you. When you would be killed, you instead disappear. You reappear anywhere where your name is spoken in the next week. Your name must be said in the context of recounting one of your exploits, including your death. If the person speaking your name is a close ally, such as another PC, you return to life with only 1 hit point. However, if a stranger speaks your name, you return to life with full hit points and gain a +1 status bonus to attack rolls, perception, saving throws, and skill checks for 1 week. If no one speaks your name within a week of your death, your soul enters the River of Souls, and you can be brought back to life using other means. Yes, the Eternal Legend is such an amazing warrior that merely the act of describing their fights brings them back to life. Every single one of these Mythic Destinies has a feat like this that gives your character some form of limited immortality, and there is a lot of fun to be had here. Here's the introduction to the Godling Mythic Destiny, which, quite literally, sets you on the path to becoming a deity. Now, honestly, I could talk about Mythic Callings and Destinies and things like that for quite some time, but we're not done with the book yet. So let's go ahead and briefly mention the Mythic Vault, which is the section that talks about storied equipment, mythic artifacts, mythic spells, and mythic rituals. In case you've been wondering how to get your weapons and armor up to +4, that is presented in this book, by the way. But essentially this chapter will present some tools that mythic characters might use, such as mythic artifacts, and as previously discussed, mythic spells as well. You also get a brief section on mythic rituals, such as the wonderfully named Curse of Calamity, meaning that mythic characters have a lot of fun toys that they get to mess around with. Now, ultimately, the Mythic Vault section is only about 20 pages long, so like I mentioned in the weaknesses section of this video, it does feel a little bit too condensed for my taste. I wish there had been a little bit more content, but I understand that Paizo was trying to cover a lot of ground in this book. You can see that Paizo mostly used Mythic Vault to set the stage for future stories they might tell. But all of this leads into the final section, which is the Mythic Monsters section, which is going to give storytellers some advice and insight on how to adjust or create monsters for use in mythic stories. And I'm going to go ahead and say that I'm not going to show any further pages in this section because I really do not want to spoil any content for players who might get to play in a mythic game. There is some fun stuff in this section, but as this is very much a Game Master section, I don't want to dig any further into this. Though if we do look over here at this sidebar, we see things like Demon Lord, Immortal Trickster, Kaiju, and Weaver of Webs. Huh. Did Paizo give us a mythic spider? Game Masters have fun with that. But with all of that, we have a brief overview of what can be found in the book War of Immortals. As I've said, I really love this product. It is tailor-made to the kinds of stories that I love telling, so this is very much a product that I'm going to use a lot at my gaming table. Paizo sent me a free review PDF of this book, but I am 100% picking up a physical copy because this is a book I know I'm going to love, and even though I've only skimmed certain sections of it so far, I'm already finding a ton of stuff that I think is very compelling. Now, I do realize that there's a lot of conversation going around the Pathfinder community about this book, and especially the Mythic rules is getting a lot of conversation, so my hope is to come back in November and start covering the Mythic rules a little more in depth, and give some of my more serious thoughts about Mythic rules and how Paizo has approached them. But for now, I think we have a good idea of what this book includes, and if you think that these kinds of stories might be something that you and your players would enjoy, I highly recommend checking this book out. But with all of that, the time has come to turn this conversation over to you. So, what are your thoughts about War of Immortals? What questions do you have? What things do you really like? And what are some aspects of this book that concern you? Definitely jump down to the comments section and let me know. And if there's something particular you'd like to see me address in a future video, definitely leave that down there, and when I come back to this book next month, I will try to include those things in those videos. Don't forget to do all of the stuff that helps support the channel. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. You can check out my free Discord and my Patreon. Again, big thank you to Paizo for sending me a review PDF of this book. It was a ton of fun to make this video. But, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for being part of the conversation. Have a wonderful day.